Well, it is 12 o'clock. Time to start our program. I know we don't have our normal crowd here today. I think that's because they heard that Terry's still in Arizona. I think he's coming home this coming week. I wouldn't guarantee it, so I'm not betting any money on it. But he did say that he thought he would come home this week. He's been having a great time. He's been out there, 3 weeks now, and just enjoying his family and everything out there. So he'll be back with us shortly. I know by the next Tonkawa meeting, which is the second Tuesday night, he'll be back with us. So we have several things going on. First of all, Kay County Republican group is having their convention next Saturday, the county convention. If you'd like to go, I think they still have room. So just get a hold of Joe or Nathan. Nathan, I think, is taking care of registration. You can call him or get on the website or respond to his emails if you get that. But you can look all that information up on the website. The VFW next Saturday, and they're providing lunch and have a guest speaker, Charity Lynch. She's the founder of Freedom Brigades, and she's going to speak at the luncheon. So that should be interesting. But they're really trying to get precincts organized and really get rolling for this next season. So that's the Kay County Republicans. No, it's actually 9. The lunch is at 9. Well, registration begins at 9:10 to 2. They're estimating. So big chunk out of the middle of the day. We have a lot of things on our plate, or our plate, the legislature's plate. So a lot of bills to consider. Right now, I'm tracking 28 pages worth for Don. And by Thursday, it will be cut in half, I'm sure. Thursday is the deadline for bills to come out of committee. So traditionally, a large portion of the bills don't make it out of committee. So we'll be cutting this thick document down to about half. So Don approves of all this, and then we send it out to all the county coordinators. So they kind of have an idea of what bills we're kind of interested in, or some of them are bills that I'm interested in since I'm putting it together. But there's a lot of things on the plate, and we'll see what happens. I know Representative Pfeiffer and Senator Coleman were in town Friday. They were in Tonkawa at 7 a.m. and then they went to Newkirk, and then they went to Ponca City. So they had 3 town hall meetings, I guess you'd say, talking about what was going on in the legislature. So we'll see after this coming week how things really shape up, and we'll really get an idea now of what's advancing and what's not advancing. So if you want to see this, feel free to come up and look at this. It's not secret information. It's just the list I compile for Don, and Don takes a glance at it, makes any additions or corrections, and then we send it out to all the county coordinators for OK2A. so everybody will have kind of an idea of what's happening. Anything else we need to announce? All right. Well, we're very pleased to have Representative Key with us again. Charles Key is a former Republican member of the House of Representatives. He served on a lot of committees, and he's been with us before, so you've probably heard a lot of the things that he has done and served in the House for us. He has his professional experience includes insurance and securities, but he's been especially interested in the Murrah bombing and the issues concerning that. And so this is his second book concerning that. So I think he's got a lot of interesting details and information for us. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Key. Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself thinking of all the announcements. Jack, would you lead us in prayer, please?
And let's all bow our heads. Father, we want to thank you for the opportunity of coming here today. And Lord, the importance of these meetings. We pray, Father, today that you help us to be easy and speak your words, God, that will touch our hearts. Lord, I pray, God, that you bring people online to hear this. And Lord, I pray that you guide us and direct us in your ways. Watch over us, God, and be with our election.
Shall we stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball. All right. Mr. Key.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really pleased and honored to be here again with you today. We'll go to the first slide. I love coming up here. I like this part of the country. I like everybody up here. I've always met over the years, so I enjoy being with you guys. You know, there's a concept called open government that started a good, decade plus ago. Porter Davis, some of you may know him. He was a former state rep. He got real involved in trying to get the precinct, get the party and organize basically at the precinct and local level. At the concept of an open government and transparency, his idea was to get more people involved, among other things, and mine was focusing on this issue because I'd had such personal experience with it. So we worked on open government as a concept of 2 or 3 things that it included when we started, and now it's kind of grown into a bigger idea, and this is one part of it. The problem is, and that's the subject of the book, this originally was a smaller book. There's probably somebody here that might have seen it, a smaller little booklet, and I'll give more time give more explanation as I go along. It turned into this. I just recently rewrote it. I wanted to expand on it and continue to push the issue. Somebody's got to do it on any issue, and so we finally got that done. The problem is, most of you probably know, or all of you probably know, leadership, people that we call leaders in the House and Senate, like a chairman of a committee, the speaker, the pro tem, primarily the floor leader, use dictatorial powers to control things, and they deny bills being heard, among other things that they will do. Let's go to the next slide. A little bit more about me. Appreciate the introduction. I lived here almost all my life. Grew up in this western part of Oklahoma City, over there close to Bethany and Overholser, in that area. And I served in 2 different tenures from 86 to 98. I ran in 84 and lost the first time, like so many people do, and then served for 12 years. The Democrats were in the majority then, and that's the significance of me going over this every time I talk about it, about this issue. The Democrats were in the majority. It's almost flip-flop in the House and Senate from the numbers we see today. We've got more today than what they had. They had 68 to 72 when I was there in those early years. And so then I ran again in 06. The Republicans had taken over the House in 2004. 2006, there's an election coming up, and in my House seat, which I still live in and lived in then, had some Republican friends that were still legislators calling me, and they said, hey, you know, we need you to run again because there's a rhino running. He's probably going to win. He had a lot of money and stuff, and we got all the rhinos we need up here. We don't need any more rhinos. So I thought about it, and, you know, I thought, well, it's nice to have somebody say, we'd like for you to run. You know, that's kind of nice to hear. But the main thing was the Republicans were in the majority, and I thought it would at least be more fun, more enjoyable, and I probably can get some things done. And that was true. And I think we're better off with the Republicans in there. I mean, of course I believe that. But I knew a couple of things that probably would not ever change, and this issue is nonpartisan. It's not even nonpartisan from our point of view. It's nonpartisan from the power structure and those that go there or get kind of hooked into this mode of focused on the power and the potential personal benefit it can mean to them. And there's always people like that on both parties, we know. So my focus has primarily been on things related to the Constitution and truth, transparency, openness. I was involved in the bombing. This is the kind of thing you get involved in something like that, and it stays with you the rest of your life, whether you like it or not. And happy to talk about that. But we talked about the Open Government Project. I'm tempted to go off my script here, and when I do that, I get real screwed up. Let's go to the next slide, Steve. So do you ever feel like, I mean, I know you do, because I've talked to you guys before and talked to a lot. I've been going around all over the state talking about this issue to Second Amendment groups and, oddly, more than any other place, GOP county organizations. You know, there was a day in the past that it was always persona non grata to talk about something like this and other issues or reforms that might be pointing the finger even at our Republican guys. But, you know, times change, and here we are. Why don't we get more accomplished? We've got 80, is it 80? I think it's 80 House members now, 40 out of 48 senators. Why can't we get more accomplished? You probably have legislators from time to time, you've either heard stories that somebody else told you, maybe some of you have had this happen even recently, where a rep or a senator might tell you, when you're talking to them face to face or on the phone, you don't understand what's going on up here. And implied is, don't tell me what to do or how to vote. You don't get it. You don't really know. You're not qualified to have the knowledge to be able to cast votes. The reason I say it like that is because this recent Senate pro tem vote, which I know everybody's aware of that, and probably most of you have read a lot of the stuff that's out there, that many people like us were calling their state senator, and more than one had their state senator say things like I just said to you. You don't understand. They wanted them to vote for Bullard, not McCourtney. Well, you don't get it. You don't understand how everything works up here and what the right person to vote is, you know. So, you know, we have people that go up there and they look out for themselves again. They're looking out to get something for themselves, but there's a lot of good people that go up there. And they get sucked into this system, which are mainly about the rules. It's a lot like taking a new job. You know, you kind of have to learn the ropes, and you get to know people, and you get to know how those people and that organization operates. And that's what most people find themselves faced with when they first get elected. Some will push back. Most will find a way to survive, but everybody understands that the leadership is either directly communicating or you understand that you'll do what they want and go along with their agenda for the most part, or you're going to get marginalized. You know, maybe even just shut out. And we could talk about members that probably some of you know that's happened to. Nathan Dahm, Joe Silk, Mike Reynolds, myself, a lot of us that get discriminated against, and some of them just kind of get blackballed altogether. So you got to go along with them, or you'll pay a price. Next slide, please. So the system in crisis is basically based on the political elites, like they get called. They're actually big money donors. They may have organizations, or they may just be people that we know their names and they give a lot of money. And I'm going to get into the money thing a little bit more. But the special interest groups, they're the ones that have the ear of legislators when you get up there, because they're up there, they're all over the place. And you got to be really strong not to be overly influenced by them. As I'm going around speaking to groups, boy, is it opening up a can of worms and a communication. Because I was on the phone yesterday or the day before, a lady from a county that I'm going to go speak to here pretty soon wanted to tell me some things that had just happened. She's real involved in daycare and some other companies like that and organizations, so they have to interface with DHS a lot, and they go to the Capitol a lot because they've got their own association and they're looking at legislation and they're trying to protect themselves, so they go up there and talk to legislators a lot. She was spitting bullets. She was so mad because they had just been up there this past week. And to sum it up, you had her senator and some other legislators telling them, she and some other people, ladies that run these daycares, how things were going to happen, as opposed to them saying, look, we've got some ideas here that need to be addressed or, reformed or something. And it was clear to them, and this is what she was really chomping at the bit about, it was clear that the people and even legislators are not necessarily making all those decisions. You got the agencies and special interest groups that are chiming in because they want to look at what somebody's proposing, and that's exactly what they do. And they decide if it's going to affect them and their organization or their company, and then they can go to the speaker and the chairman and say, hey, this one HB so-and-so by Key is not a good thing and it's going to cause problems and blah, blah, blah. Well, those organizations have given a lot of money to those guys, and not just in their own campaign accounts. I started to get into it in this book about at the federal level, what the rules are like at the federal level, because what we're talking about here, it's even worse up there, as I'm sure you understand and know, but also the money part of it. And we decided not to, because the first little booklet, I wanted it to be like this in the sense that it was easy to read and easy for just the average person. Here, take this, read it, and you get it. You don't have to have some things explained or definitions of something, you just flat out get it. That some committee chairman and other leaders will from time to time say, no, I'm not going to hear your bill. Don't have to give you a reason or anything. Not going to hear your bill. Sometimes they may give you a reason, and it may be truthful or it may just be a lie. In any event, you won't get heard. Well, those leaders have an account for their own campaign, right? We all know how that works. You got a bank account, you raise money, there's money in it, you spend it for your campaign, it's regulated, it's overseen by ethics commission, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's all these other PACs that we hear about, like dark money PACs and various names. And that's a big old can of worms. I talk a little bit about it in here, but I decided to leave it alone. Don't go down trails where it confuses the issue that we're talking about here. But what it gets to is those donors, whether they be special interest groups or moneyed individuals or organizations, have all the power up there. I say all the power. They've got too much power. Kind of like the headline on this, as I started getting publicity, the Tulsa World and others started writing pretty good articles. One of the headlines said, too few in control of too much. And the few are the speaker, the pro tem, the governor. And when you look at how much weight they have on the scale because of the power they have through rules and what have you, they're making most of the decisions, especially the important ones. So let's go to the next slide. And we wonder why not many people vote, not many people are registered, and out of that group, not very many of them even vote. A lot of people gave up a long time ago. So here's an example of how much power they have. The speaker, and this is probably redundant for many of you, the speaker and the Speaker of the House, Speaker Pro Tem of the Senate, they appoint every chairman. They appoint every vice chairman of every committee. they make the membership of every committee. And they assign all the bills to the committee they want to assign it to. Now, the people that are going to make chairman and vice chairman are going to be primarily, not all of them because there's actually too many, but they try to put their friends or people that are like-minded or that will do what they want them to do from time to time, and they'll have conversations about that we're a team, leadership has to do things, has to take charge and whatever their story is, and they want people that are going to be chairman that will do what they want them to do. They can't do it with everyone, and they'll use seniority sometimes. I was a committee chairman in my last 2-year term. Probably should have been one a long time ago as far as equality goes, just because of the longevity, but they didn't make me one in past years because they knew I wouldn't be controlled. But they made me the chairman of the insurance committee, and so I'm just using myself as an example. I've seen many of these situations. So when they assign a bill that maybe they want to make sure that they have control over it as it goes through the process or kill it, then they'll put it in a different committee. So we had some Obamacare reform legislation that they did not put in my committee because they knew I would hear it and we would deal with it, straight up and do the right thing. So they'll put it in a different committee. So there's no rules that say education bills have to go into education committee, ag bills go into ag committee. They usually do because that makes sense, but they don't always do that. So they're able to make all those appointments and what have you, and that's how they really have the control along with the money. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about the money right now anyway. So anyone, if you're in office especially, or if you're not in office, you can go create a PAC. We make a PAC and we give it some name like God's gift to mankind. All we're going to do is just do wonderful things for everybody. And then you can start raising money, and then individuals or groups that have already maxed out to your campaign can put it over here, can put another amount of money over here in this other PAC. And then you could open up another PAC. And this actually happens with leadership a lot. The speaker, the pro tem, some of the bigger committee chairs like oil and gas, banking, a few others that have a lot of big moneyed interests associated with them, they'll open up yet another PAC, and then those individuals and organizations can dump money in there. Well, how do you use that? Beyond using it for your election, the other ones can be used to, let's say everybody here is a state rep and I'm the guy running for speaker or speaker pro tem like McCourtney. Matter of fact, I heard it, I don't know if it's true, so if anybody's recording this, I wouldn't doubt it, that McCourtney was able to promise like $5,000 to 10 members to their campaign, to the future campaign, for their vote for speaker, pro tem. Now, I don't know if McCourtney actually did that, that's what I heard, but I do know that stuff happens because you can go look at the records and follow the paper trail. So that's one of the ways they do this. But see, this is from a representative. What we did is, when I updated this book, I wanted to talk to other legislators from other states. So out of the 50 states, 30 of them have rules like ours, where the top guys have all that power and they get up to do all those different things. 20 of them have rules where it either requires every bill be heard or another process where they can't be deep sixed. They have to be dealt with in a public, transparent manner. And it works fine. See, what the opposition to this wants to say is, or act like, well, we can't do that. This is some kind of new idea that somebody came up with, a harebrained idea. It's not very smart. We can't hear all those bills. And so the fact is that there are 20 states that have been doing this for a long time, and the world has not come to an end in those states. They deal with it just like we do here in this state. Sometimes a committee like education will have a ton of bills in it, a jillion, and they might have to work late at night till 5:30 or 6 sometimes, and maybe after that for a few weeks. And they think that's a big deal. So they like to use the argument that we'll get into a little bit more. But this is an example where one state rep, I'm not sure if that was Mike Reynolds or someone else. Most of the people that we quoted here, we didn't use their names, but some of them we did for the obvious reasons. But if you have someone that wants you to vote a certain way, Well, let me put it like this. A good friend of mine named Mark Lerner, anybody happen to know Mark Lerner by chance? He is one of the experts on biometrics and real ID. He worked with us here in Oklahoma real closely, became real good friends with Randy Brogdon. Brogdon and I kind of tag teamed for a couple of 3 or 4 years on real ID and biometrics. And so Mark is actually, I think he's probably the expert in the country on biometrics and real ID, but he's one of them at least. And he's worked with lots of federal congressmen and senators, their staffs, and still does. And he's very well connected. Well, he used to work for Coburn, not employed by him, but worked with him on this stuff. And so if you remember, does everybody remember Coburn voted for the TARP bill, which was a bailout bill for banks, among other things? And that was real controversial. And he got, just like Langford recently got, and others from time to time, he got bombarded with constituent calls and stuff saying, what are you doing? Why'd you vote that way? Well, it was about this time of the year, and it was leading up probably a few weeks or a month before the state convention. So it was in this basic time frame. And a good friend of mine, kind of have to set this up, a little funny part, was telling me, he said, and others were saying, well, with the state convention's coming up, and these federal guys, they always like to let them talk, and they let them talk forever and say whatever they want, and then they make excuses for other stuff at our state convention that we can't do or whatever. And so this friend of mine, Dale, he said, you know, when we get there to state convention and Coburn gets up to speak, I'm going to stand up and say, well, what about your vote on the TARP bill, you know? And I said, oh, okay, well, you know, I said jokingly, I said, well, just give me a couple of minutes before you do that so I can get up and get away from you, you know? And he was kind of nudging me anyway, like, oh, I'm going to do this. And so as a couple of weeks went by, it came up another time or two, and he said, you don't want me to do it, do you? You don't want me, you don't have the guts to sit there with me, is what he's saying. And so we were joking. So we're at the state convention, we're sitting next to each other, and people were really ticked off about that. And so Dale gets up, as soon as Coburn gets introduced, gets to the podium, he goes, what about your vote on the TARP bill? And at least half the crowd, is anybody there that remembers this? At least half the audience, and it was a big audience, you know, like those state conventions are, got up and were yelling too. You know, it was like, get a rope, let's get this guy. It was kind of the mood. And so he got flustered. He goes, well, you want to know why I voted on that? He goes, if I hadn't voted on the TARP bill, your ATMs wouldn't work the next day. That was his excuse. So back to Mark Lerner. I sent him a copy of this about 6 weeks or so ago when it first came out, maybe a couple of months. And Mark's real long-winded whenever you talk to him, but he's so knowledgeable. He knows so much. He's a great guy. And he sends me back a really long email. I kept reading it because I didn't look how long. I thought, how long does this thing go? This goes forever. Great stuff in there that he was reminiscing about and relating it to this issue. And at one point he talks about Coburn. He goes, you know, when I was working with Coburn, blah, 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 and he goes, and this goes to your point in your book. He goes, I remember asking Coburn right after he voted for TARP, he said, why did you vote for that bill anyway? And he goes, leadership told me if I didn't vote for it, they weren't going to hear any of my bills anymore. You won't get any of your bills heard. United States Senator Tom Coburn. And that stuff happens all the time. That's the answer to, why don't you guys do X? Or Langford, why don't you do X? Or why did you do X? We're going to have a neat video we're going to show here in a minute that's going to show some more federal congressmen and how they get out of control. So you've always got this problem. They're either going to tell you how to vote, and if you don't vote that way or you don't do X, then you know they're going to blackball you, and sometimes you get it told to you straight up, straight to your face. Let's go to the next one. Everybody knows, I think, here pretty much how our laws are made. We elect people, the session starts as it just did, and bills will be drafted at about the November and December timeframe, beginning about that time, and go into until the session starts. And typically you'll go to the staff. You don't have to go to the staff. You can use outside sources or do your own thing if you want to, but it's good to go to the staff so you make sure you get various little legal stuff taken care of. So you go to staff, you get a bill drafted, it gets filed. There's a filing period, and then the bill will be heard, potentially. It'll be at least read on the floor because it's required by law, and then various things will or will not happen after that. Well, the reason we're going to talk about this for a minute is because it goes to the objections they give. Members will file bills, and they're not all important or necessarily, because a constituent may come to you and say, you know, we've got this problem with whatever, maybe it's an agency or something that needs to be addressed. So you file a bill to address that in November or December. Well, you might find out a little bit after that, in January or February, whenever, maybe right away. Sometimes staff might even tell you, well, you know, Representative so-and-so's got a bill like that also, or something. So what happens, my point here is you file a lot of bills, or you file some number of bills. Some of those might be redundant. They might be addressing an issue that somebody else is also trying to address, another legislator, maybe multiple ones. And so when you get to that point, you might decide, hey, I'll just tag onto that bill. I don't need to have my own bill. We've all got the same one. We don't need to waste our time. And so a lot of the bills that I might have on my agenda, here's my list, you know, half of them may drop off because you get to the point of the legislature starting, and it's not necessary that you push your bill forward, because maybe they just fix the issue at the agency level and it's satisfied and it doesn't need to be addressed. So every bill doesn't have to get heard, but it's not bad to have a rule that we hear all bills like 20 other states do. That's not a bad thing. And it can be done. It's not a burden. It happens in other states, and they do it, and it works fine. I'm really focusing on this because that's their number one argument. But when a bill gets heard, it goes to a committee. If it passes committee, it can go to the floor. It's subject to go to the floor. But then they also have a gate there, too. They'll stop it if they don't want it to go forward. But then it goes forward. If it passes, then it goes over to the Senate, goes through the same process. If there's not any major changes that both bodies have to talk about and iron out, it'll go to the governor. He'll either sign it or not, or veto it or something like that. And that's the basic structure. Let's go to the next slide. Well, the reason they say they don't hear bills is because there's too many bills. The reason they're opposed to this idea of hearing bills if a legislator wants his bill to be heard is because of time or something like that. But the real reason is because somebody is whispering in their ear or talking to them, and they don't want that bill heard. And it only happens to maybe 10, 20, 30 bills a year. It's even not easy to track exactly unless you just talk to the legislators or you're aware enough and you track it. But that's my estimate of 18 years of being in the legislature and watching it all this time. It's not that many. So it's not like, gee, there's a lot of bills they're refusing to hear, and there's this overriding principle that all bills ought to be heard. I think there's a principle that all bills ought to be heard personally. But the world won't come to an end if we had a rule that said a bill has to be heard if a member puts it in writing to the chairman. Then the chairman must hear it. You know, if it's ready to go to the floor, put it in writing again to the floor leader or the speaker. I want my bill brought up on the House floor. Then they have to do it. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish here, is stopping the special interest, the corrupted stuff that's going on behind the scenes that we get little glimpses of from time to time. Because it's morally, in my opinion, it's morally wrong for one duly elected House or Senate member to tell another one, not going to hear your bill, just because you got a title of chairman or something like that of a committee. It's just wrong. So sometimes they'll steal bills. Sometimes let's talk about leverage. A lot of times the chairman will say, well, I'll hear your bill. And that's what happened to this lady I just mentioned that they work with DHS a lot. They were offering real solutions, and what they were getting back was, well, stick with us, but we're going to come up with some other language, and here's the language that we say is acceptable based on what we think and our knowledge and all of our experience and what you're requesting. So what they'll do, I had a member do this, and this member, you know, I mean, most of the people we elect up there are pretty good people. Generally, I mean, you'd go to church with them, you'd work with them, you wouldn't know maybe all that much different. You wouldn't think they're bad guys, like you kind of get that attitude, you know, if you're in a political situation like this and you have these kind of things going on. And I'm saying that because here, in this case, I'm not going to tell you who it is right now, a really good guy made him chair of the Rules Committee, and you've probably heard this before. If something gets assigned to the Rules Committee, it means they don't want it to go out. They're going to kill it in that Rules Committee because the chairman, vice chairman, and the makeup of that Rules Committee is specifically made with individuals who will do what leadership wants, and they understand they're on that committee for that purpose. They may have 2 or 3 on there of the total of that committee that aren't of that mind, and it may be the Democrats, the minority party, as opposed to the majority. So I'm talking to this chairman, and he's saying, I'm not going to hear your bill, and I'm giving him some real grief for not, and having meetings with him and sitting down in his office. And so he's feeling the pressure from me, and he starts talking about amending my bill. Well, if you'll do this and take this out, maybe add this or whatever, I don't remember, it's not important, then I'll hear it. And I was really giving it to him because, and here's a guy, he's a good Christian guy. I think he was even a minister for a period of time, very active in his church and in his fellowship and denomination and all that kind of stuff. But people get up there and they get stuck in this system. And once you start saying, yes, I will do that in some form or another to leadership, I will go along, it's hard to turn around and go backwards. And we're going to see more of that. Sometimes they'll steal a bill, and we saw this when we were in the minority, those first 12 years, the Democrats would just not hear something, all of a sudden, next session, it comes back. The same bill, like my bill, but it's got the Democrat's name on it, a leadership or something. They just steal the issue. And there's all kinds of stories like that. Let's go to the next slide. So when you think about this, let's go to even the next slide. When you think about Speaker Pro Tem, a speaker, and a governor, you think about how much power they have in our state, and especially the 30 states that have rules like we do. They got a lot of, and you just do the math, they've got a lot of power. So you do some math on that, and you realize that maybe 200 people in this country at any given time, like a speaker, pro tem, and a governor, maybe a couple of others, they got a lot of power. They're making most of the major decisions. Not all the decisions, the major ones. Just like the bills that are denied are just really a few in a year compared to the whole, like 10, 20, or 30. But it's those special interests or others that are saying to them what to hear and what not to hear. But they have a lot of power, and that's too much power in the hands of too few. So I brought this up. Why do they do it? We all know this stuff happens, and we're all aware of this recent Carrie Lake deal about a month or so back when she revealed that she was bribed. They attempted to bribe her to get out of the race. Well, gosh, I know stories. I've heard stories up there, like the one I'm getting ready to tell you, and then I know some, like the one I'm getting ready to tell you, are true. A good friend of mine, not there anymore, he was terming out probably a couple of terms ago, was considering running for a county position in Oklahoma County. And so the lobbyist, this guy might be the longest term lobbyist, maybe the biggest one in the state too, I don't know, close to it, been around forever, got a lot of power. Comes in trying to get him to change his vote. I think now, I don't remember it, I think it was on the vote for the Indian Cultural Center down there. They kept trying to get state money associated with that forever. They finally did the right thing, and I think they've done it all with private money. So he was trying to get his vote on that, and he goes, I can't do it. And he says, look, I've got this check that I can give you from one of the associations, special interest groups that he represents, and I can promise for your county race, we will get you the money you need. And he turned that down, and he went and reported it. Unfortunately, guess who he reported it to? The Speaker of the House. Which is what most people do when that's happened. That's happened multiple times that I'm aware of. And that to go to another place like the Ethics Commission would be a public deal, or an attorney general or district attorney would be a public thing, and so most members don't want to do something like that. There's other possible repercussions. But bribing, let's go to that next slide too. Now I'm going to tell this story. I don't have Burchett's stuff, but we're going to see a video here in just a minute. Congressman Tim Burchett. I don't know if anybody knows who he is. He's been real involved in the immigration thing big time, and also the UFO subject, if you kind of watch that. He's a guy that just tells it like it is. You know, we need to know this stuff. There's no reason not to know it, and boom. So he made a comment, if you caught it, and it was a part of a larger interview with, I can't remember who it was now. Might have been, I don't think it was Tucker Carlson, it was somebody else. But he made a comment about, yeah, there's a lot of these parties that go on. I should set this up a little bit more. If you don't know this, there was that young congressman named Madison, whatever his first or last name was, from North Carolina, a real young guy in a wheelchair. And he made some statements about the parties and the get-togethers and things that go on in Washington, D.C., and it was very controversial. And he got defeated. They came after him and knocked him out. So now, go to 2024, I think might have been the end of last year, Burchett's talking, and he goes, yeah, you know, there's all these parties and get-togethers and events after, and you know, cocktail parties and stuff like that, just like happens down here. And he said, then there's parties that go on and a lot of sexual stuff and who knows what else, maybe whatever, drugs or something that go on there. And I think they must have asked him about that. And he said, well, yeah, that certainly goes on. And then they get you on video or something like that, and then somebody comes and whispers in your ear. This is almost exactly what he was saying, the way he put it. Somebody will whisper in your ear and say, you know, you ought to vote this way on that bill. It happens, and I love it when the truth is revealed by people like this. But here's an interesting one. Ted Bose, let's look at that video. It's pretty loud, I think. This one was like a godsend for this whole subject. That pretty much speaks for itself. And you know, that guy was not some right-wing, you know, extreme conservative Republican. This guy is from Illinois. Do they have any conservatives up there? And secondly, he's like a 12 or 14-year veteran. And he did this just about a month ago, about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I think it was right after they brought that one immigration bill out. I don't remember which one it was now, one of the 2 or 3, that they didn't get to see. They laid it on their desk, so we're getting ready to vote on this big old bill, which happens frequently and happens down there more and more. And so he had all he could take, and he just freaked out. And you'd think maybe I paid him to do all that because it's perfect for what we're talking about. People get sick of it. He's probably in the category of one of these members that goes along, tries to get along, tries to do the right thing, and he's been there and he sees it happen over and over, all kinds of crap, and he loses it. Let's go to the next slide. The solution, and then the next, please. The solution is open government. And open government in this context means changing the rules to say that no duly elected member of the House or Senate can tell another duly elected member of the House or Senate that they can't have their bill heard, period. And then further, if a member wants a bill heard in a committee, he needs to ask in writing or notify in writing to the chairman. Same thing on the floor, to the floor leader, and the bill must be heard. Now, here's the arguments. Let's go to the next slide. The arguments again. We got too many bills. We can't hear them. Gosh, we'll be here all day. I've heard this so many times because we've debated this in our private caucuses that we have regularly when they're in session and then sometimes out of session. But they'll have one every Monday, and sometimes they'll have another one or two during the week, depending on how busy things get. And that's where the majority party, whatever party it is, really does a lot of their work. But really it's done in that little group of leadership and that team, whoever it is. So the speaker, the floor leader, a handful of others that he picks, and they're going to be people that are going to be, it's a team. They're not independent now, they're working together, and they understand that. And so they, gosh, I lose my train of thought there for a second. So what they'll do is they will, gosh, I'm sorry. So the answer to it is to have, this requirement. You could put a limit on it. So I'm going to tell a part of a story right now. I'll have to backtrack a little bit because we're getting ready to get into this. This issue finally got to be heard on the House floor the first day of session, February 6th or 5th of 2011. And so, let's go to the next slide. So what happened was in 2009 and 10, I sat on the floor with Chris Steele, who became Speaker the next cycle. And I think because we got to sit together and become friends, he's actually a good guy, really nice guy, but he's a rhino type. He's a liberal Republican. And so the next session started. He had already run to be the next Speaker and was elected. So first day of session, we're taking up rules. That's the only time they take up rules. And we heard this amendment to the bill, to the rules. And so what happened on that day, and a little background, is the rules are never taken up during a 2-year session. Every time we go to the polls, every even-numbered year, that's every 2 years, we elect members to the House, because their terms are 2 years. And then what that does, that creates a new legislative session. So a legislative session, it only has a life of 2 years, and it dies. It's dead. It no longer exists. We go to the polls, we elect people prior to that happening, and then those people become the new legislature. A lot of the same people, as we know. Well, they get in there, it's a new creature, so it doesn't have rules or anything. It must have, operating rules and all that kind of stuff, so they always take the rules from the previous legislature, obviously. And if they want to make any changes, the leadership, they'll make some then. And so we're on that first day of session in that 2011, and a lot of things happened there. We had a number of amendments. Mine was either the last or like next to the last one. So we did a lot of it was house cleaning stuff. And we get to my amendment, I get up, and it's normal procedure when you're in a committee or on the floor, and the author will get up and he'll explain the bill. This bill will do X, Y, and Z. And then you take Q&A, as you guys probably have watched a lot of that. And then they'll do Q&A, and then at some point they'll say, okay, everybody divide up what side you're on and who's going to debate, and then they'll get that set up, and then the pros, the fors and against will go back and forth with each other. The author of the bill will be the last one that gets the last say. So we're going through all that, and we get a few people get up and in the Q&A and make a few comments, or just want to know how things will work. And one of the things they bring up is, well, how many bills were filed last year, and how many more bills you think we're going to end up hearing because of this? And let me just tell you, this is a fake issue. It's a fake argument. It has no legitimacy. It sounds like it does, but it really doesn't. So let's say there's 2,500 bills that get filed. And now we're looking at a rule that will say every member has a right to have their bill heard if they just put it in writing. Well, I'm going to tell more of that story in a minute, but some people say, and the leadership always, this is their number one argument, everybody's going to want to have all their bills heard. I mean, gosh, right? We're going to be flooded. Think about how much work we're going to have to be doing. They get paid, don't they? I think they get paid pretty decent. A lot better than when I was there. It's probably triple what when I was there. And so we don't have the time. So I've argued this in our private caucuses. And I've argued it on the floor and in a committee and in other smaller groups. And it's always the same argument. So we can't do that. 2,500 bills, we only, ran through maybe a third of those, they might say. And so if everybody wants their bills heard, we're going to be here day and night constantly. Well, it's not true, and here's a couple of reasons why. You know that we spend a lot of time recognizing people, letting people speak. If it's a presidential year like this, if somebody's coming through the state, we let every presidential candidate come and speak. We do lots of things that aren't the people's business. And so when you say you don't have time, that's just a false argument, especially if you're up there. You know that there's time to do it. And there's 20 states that do this. As we talk to legislators, and some of them talk about it in there, they tell real examples, just like we've had them. Like I mentioned, the Education Committee might have a jillion bills in there. Well, they get it done somehow. You're paid to do it. Like Harry Truman said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. It's your job to do. So it can be done. So the benefits of hearing every bill, transparency, elevating the people's voices to a place where it should be, in my opinion, bringing about change that we can't seem to get done. Why can't we get some things done? Some people have a hand on the scale. They've got more say than the people do. And just being engaged is a positive thing. People are really, everybody knows this. It's been this way forever, probably all our lives, most of our lives anyway. People are really understanding how screwed up, our political system is. It's still, the best one, but it's got a lot of problems. And it's these problems like this that never get seen or addressed, even if they are seen, and they just sit there and they get worse. We get to a time like, in my opinion, we get to a time like we're in today, and now you got real problems. Let's go to the next one. Next. So there's not enough time to hear every bill. So I'm going to tell a story. There was, that there was the pro tem race just recently, and there's also a House Speaker race, and that's going on right now. And they haven't called that one yet because it's supposed to be real close, is what my understanding is. Well, that was going on in 2011. So I'm going to tell the story in just a second about that debate on the House floor on the amendment. But after that, then we went on with the legislative session, went on with the business as usual, and this became an issue that members were talking about because we had just voted as an amendment to the rules. It actually lost. I'll explain that. But people were really ticked off about it because they, just like Congressman boast, they live with this stuff and it bubbles up to some point and they want to do something about it. So I brought this up. People got to talk openly about it, and even in the closed door caucuses, talking to the leadership, blah, blah, blah. And so it was fresh. It was fresh on everybody's mind. So one day, these two gentlemen running for speaker, I might have told this story here before, I tell it everywhere I go. Jeff Hickman from Alva, Oklahoma, was running. He was the moderate candidate. And then T.W. Shannon was the other one. He was the conservative candidate. And I love T.W. Shannon. I really do. I think he's a great guy. I'd vote for him for a public office right now. But he got caught in a little bad situation here. So he's trying to get the votes. So conservatives are on his side. The others are on this other side. And it's tight. It's really tight. So the conservative members like Jason Murphy and a bunch of those guys, some of you might know, are coming up to me and say, Charlie, come on, you got to get on board with TW. And I said, I'm going to put it off. I didn't have to. I wasn't even going to be there the next time. I was going to get the vote on this, but it was electing the next speaker. I wouldn't even be a part of the legislature. Didn't matter to me. I was just kind of playing it a little bit because I didn't have to do that. And so I said, I'm going to wait and see how they think about this bill, see if they're willing to do anything about this. So a little time goes by. One day, TW, we're on the floor, and things are not, there's not a bill being heard right that minute. We're in between. He goes, Keith, come up here. Let's go to your desk and talk about this issue. So we go up to the front desk. One of mine's the front ones, and a bunch of other members, like 4 or 5 other members, came up right away. They were going to get in on this. and talk about it. So we're going to talk about this. And what I'm getting ready to tell you is the way it always goes when there's a debate or discussion. So we sit down and we're starting to talk about the number of bills. What's the issue, he says. I said, well, it's like I've always said, it's just wrong, and I think it's a moral issue for anyone to tell another member they can't have their bill heard. It's wrong on both sides of that equation. Shouldn't be happening. And I said, plus, we can do it. It's easily able to be done, and we all know why it happens. Well, if we do what you're proposing, let every member have their bills heard, they put it in writing, everybody's going to want to have their bills heard, blah, 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 what I've already talked about. And, that's going to be untenable somehow. We're not going to be able to do that. And so we start talking. It's like a group of people or guys will start talking about the different aspects of this. So people are bringing up, well, let's see, we had 2,500 bills last year and 800 of them went through. That means there's another, whatever that number is. And gosh, if we do that, divide it by X, Y, and Z, doing various math, stuff like that. Yeah, that's a lot. Well, I speak up and I say, you could limit the number of bills as long as it's fair and equal to all legislators. Well, somebody brings up and says, well, we've got that rule in our rule book that if we make make a list of our top 8 priority bills that we have, then it implies that you'll get that bill heard. I'll give you a little background on that, take a little side note here. They put that in place a few years before that, when I'd been there in the past, and they did it in response to what we're talking about here, because it was bubbling up again. People were getting ticked off. And so they go, okay, we're going to put this rule in. You guys need to make your 8 priority, declare your 8 priority bills, and it doesn't actually say, and you're guaranteed to get them heard. But that's the way it was presented. And so it gets in the rules, and everybody thinks, okay, you just kind of go with the system. And you designate your 8 bills. Well, so we're talking about this. And somebody goes, well, we got that 8 bill rule in the rules right now, and they don't even honor that, the guy said. And everybody goes, yeah, right. And so we're talking, and somebody goes, well, what if you made it the limit 5 times 101 members, 505 bills? They're saying it doesn't add, it really doesn't logically add up. But we're saying that's 500 more bills you'd have to hear that we're not hearing now. It's not really true and an accurate statement. And then somebody goes, well, yeah, that might be too many, and people are saying things. Somebody goes, what about 3? That might be more reasonable, and everybody has 3 bills, blah, 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 a session. And I turned to TW at that point, and I said, well, TW, let me ask you this, because I keep bringing up every time through these arguments. I say, yeah, but really, it's just not right unless it's fair to everybody. And I said, TW, what about this? Would you be for every member having the right to have at least one bill heard every 2-year cycle? And that's kind of the way it went. It was kind of silent. And then he went, well, he didn't say anything substantive. He said, I got to get up and go. I got some things to do. To TW's credit, it was true. We were sitting there a long time. He had stuff to do, and we all did, but he got backed into a corner, and he knew he did, and he knew he was kind of in a tough situation. He's running for speaker, so he's trying to win that race. I know what the rational thought is, but it goes to this point. I mean, when you think about that, we're saying, please, maybe even one on a knee, can we have one bill heard every 2 years, guaranteed? Who are we talking to? Is there some bigger authority? Do we go to the polls, and is there a position on our ballot that's super House member and super Senate member that gets to decide all things? No, we don't get to decide that. We don't have a position like that. It's up to us to do it. If you think about how pathetic that really is, can we have at least one bill heard? And that's where we're at. We're not even there. They don't have to hear any bill. And it'll be done the way they want it, unless you just get lucky somehow. If you got a lot of publicity, you might be able to force something through, but it doesn't happen like that either. So we don't have enough time. Let's go to the next one. This is a long presentation today, isn't it? We don't want to go on record. Okay. So this was argued behind in our caucuses many times. You guys need us because sometimes there's some votes. The Democrats pull on us all the time. They just want to get us on record so they can try to get us in the next campaign, blah, 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 blah. And you need us, and you need that chairman to be there to say no to those bills. One of them that they talked about over the years was what we just did, eliminate the sales tax on groceries. Well, there was a time when the Democrats were offering that, and we were really tight budget, even in a deficit maybe. And so it was a tough decision to make to eliminate taxes. Believe me, I'm all for it. I would have done it anyway because we got enough fat we can cut out of the budget, a ton of fat. But they use that rationale, so they use that as one of the reasons. Well, you know, a bill like that, they're just trying to get you on the record, and maybe in a rural area like this or somewhere else, it might be a big deal. So we don't want to go on record. Next, please. We need to protect people. Next one. Every once in a while, you'll hear this. I've heard a speaker say this in the past. I can't remember the exact context, but he was talking to the press or something. He goes, well, we've already got the best people running the committee. What does that say about the rest of us? We're just not as smart as that person you chose to run that committee? How did that happen? Next. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this now. I told you about the T.W. Shannon thing, and we're almost to an end. Back up a little bit. A few weeks before that, we had the first day of session. They take the rules up. They only take it up then for two reasons. They have to acquire some rules, and they avoid dealing with any amendments from anybody. And usually the minority party is really trying to make inroads against the majority, whoever it is. But they don't want anybody making some rule changes. And so I had this bill offered, and the bottom line is we debated, and the guys that debated just prior to me were Republicans. Don Arms from Lawton, another nice guy, and you'd enjoy being around him. But he became part of the system. He gets up and he says, we've got constituents that come up to us, they want us to run a bill, and we do it, and we think it's a dumb idea. He even said something like, we've got some constituents, they're not very smart, blah, 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 and they want us to run a bill, and so we don't really want to run it, and we need that committee chairman, same thing we've already talked about. We need that committee chairman to not hear it. So you can go to that committee chairman and have a conversation. I've seen this happen many times. And say, I got this constituent, they're not very smart, or something like that, and I don't really want to have this heard, but a constituent wanted it, and if you just wouldn't hear it, I'll just tell them I couldn't get it heard in the committee. Committee chairman wouldn't hear it. Maybe even say that terrible committee chairman wouldn't hear the bill. Wink, wink. And then tell the constituent we gave it a try, And so that happens a lot. So Arms is up talking about that, making that. I couldn't believe it. You can go to the House floor, to the House website right now, go to the archive on that first day of the session in 2011, and you can watch this debate and see it for yourself, what he said. The next one got up just prior to me, and these were the Republican designated leader opposition candidates, was Dan Sullivan, who's now the head of the Grand River Dam Authority, which was a controversial thing for him to take that job right out of the legislature. You're not supposed to take a job like that for 2 years or a moratorium or something like that. He gets up and he goes, he's just tacks onto that same thing. You need us to protect you because there's some really stupid bills out here. Like, a couple of years ago, he says there was a bill that would have required barbecue restaurants to have cloth napkins in the restaurant. No more paper napkins. Well, that's pretty stupid. That's pretty bad. But he's using that. So when I get up, I said, Representative Sullivan, really? That's the best you got is a paper napkin bill? Something like that. And then I went ahead and debated. We got to this point where the vote was actually 53 to 46. So we're standing there, all debates over, here's the votes going up, and it gets to 53 for, 46 against, and it's just stuck there, and it sits. Now, the rules also have a timing rule in it so that when the vote's being taken, they can't just leave it open forever. And that's a product of when the Democrats were in charge. They were terrible about that. You might remember, some people might remember, they used to put on the clock up where the scorecard is. They'd cover up the clock right below where the votes are taken. And just because, And so it's 53-46. We're sitting there and talking to each other. I'm saying, maybe we're going to win this thing after all. Well, they pull the tricks. They've got some other tricks they do. They send some whips down the aisle to talk to primarily the new freshmen because they're easier to influence, to tell the freshmen you're going to be on the wrong side of leadership if you don't change your vote. So then, after they talked to a number of people, it started going, went the other way and went just exactly opposite, 46 for and 53 against, and they slammed the hammer down. In the meantime, a bunch of us are going to call the vote. You're supposed to call the vote. You know you're supposed to call the vote. They just wait, and they wait for the vote to change, and they do it. Who's going to do anything about that? You can't do it. You can't do much about it. So we almost won that. We should have won it. And then that story with the two guys running for speaker. But let me have the next slide, please. Next one. And so here's what we can do about it. We can do some of the things that are going on right now. Talk about it, make people aware of it. And then there's already, if you don't know, in some of your own county GOP organizations, there's a resolution that's going around, and it's already passed some of the county conventions, and it's going to go to the state convention and the platform, or I don't know if it's going to go on the platform, but it'll be considered as a resolution to say everything I've said to you today, that it's not right for somebody to deny another member. We need to change the rules so that every member can have a right to have a bill heard, and if they submit that in writing, it must be heard. Well, we all know what a resolution is, whether it's at the state convention for our party, or even if it's at the legislature, we pass resolutions. It doesn't actually have the real force of law, but it does something. And so that's one thing we can do, and that's going on right now. So if you see that as you go to your conventions or what have you, that's an important thing to do. But the other thing we need to do, that will help put pressure on legislators to change that rule. It also gives a lot of, power behind the good guys that are trying to do the right thing up there. And right now, in the House, I'm not sure about the Senate. Well, I do know there's some in the Senate, but I know there's a pretty good effort, I can't get a number on it, of members that want to make this and other changes. So again, back to this thing, things bubble up from time to time. We're at a point like that where they're darn tired of the way they get treated. As time has gone by, the pro tem and the speaker, they've used even heavier-handed tactics from time to time, even when I was there. I've seen Democrats get really mad at somebody, and they put one of theirs in a closet, kick them out of their office, and put them in a little closet office, literally, way back in the day. Well, here's what our guys did. Greg Treat did this about 4 years ago to Nathan Dahm and Joe Silk, two of the biggest pro-life guys up there. And you may remember that organization that's a big pro-life group was running ads and really making a lot of headway. Well, Treat and some of the other ones that aren't 100% pro-life, even though they want to be perceived that way, they got really ticked off, and they held it against Dom and Silk, even telling them, yeah, you're part of that deal, you're part of it. And they said, look, we're not telling those guys what to do. We do what we do up here. We're doing the same thing today. And they said, well, no, and Treat took Nathan and Silk's bills away from them. Now, I've never heard that before. It's crazy. It's outrageous. They actually, so you get elected, you go up there and you file a bill like everyone else. In retribution, just for that reason, because of this other group was putting pressure on legislators that are supposed to be pro-life, and now they're getting really scrutinized. So they took his name off, their names off of all their bills and gave it to someone else. Just blackballed them. Greg Treat, remember that. I've heard McCall did that. I didn't know it. I just heard this recently. Some members said, yeah, McCall did that to some guys, that blah, blah, blah. So we need to change the rules, but you can't trust them. They'll change the rules again. Like, for example, I heard last year, I was at Oak Pack, and Mike Reynolds came in right at their luncheon time. He said, you're not going to believe what the House just did. I said, what's that? He goes, they just gave the Speaker the right to cancel any member's vote on the House floor. And here's why they did it. There's a lady, I think she got defeated or quit, but she might still be there, a Democrat that was LGBT whatever, and she's a Muslim, and she'd wear a scarf. Remember kind of hearing some of that? Well, that goes against the House rules in terms of decorum and dress, and so she wouldn't comply with that. So instead of them dealing with it and expel her, even if it's temporarily, not for good, to make her either get in line with the rules or see you later. Instead of doing that, they passed a rule that gave the Speaker the right to just not let her vote count, or any other member for that matter, because the way it reads. And Mike was, incredulous. I said, what? Say that again. They did what? And I talked to a couple of members, and they go, well, yeah, whatever, we wanted to do that. Well, it's good for the leadership. It gives them even more power. And that's as far as being undemocratic. So the other things we can do, and I'm going to bring this to an end. We can do an initiative petition, and that's what a lot of people are thinking about right now and want to do on this, because there's so many new people that have come to the battle, like us, like you right here. And you probably heard about it all over the state. There's a lot of county GOPs that have been taken over by grassroots, et cetera, et cetera. So there is the possibility we can do that, and we're looking at possibly raising money to do it, because it's very expensive, as you know, and time consuming. So we may do that, and I like that idea if we could see our way to get that point. So probably between now and as the year goes by, we'll start making plans. First, we'll count the cost and see if we can do it, and we'll make plans, and of course, we'll certainly let everybody know that's part of this. Yes, sir.
It also has standing rules. Does the legislature don't have standing rules that from session to session, you got to abide by those rules?
Yeah, but you still have to adopt them though, because they don't exist somewhere as like law does. The laws that we pass are on the statutes. Same thing with constitutional amendments, but the rules aren't part of that. The rules are a standalone set of rules.
Standing rules that would have to have special procedures to change from session to session.
Well, what they'd use, yeah, it really starts from zero, but it doesn't seem like it in effect. It's not, because Robert's Rules of Orders and Mason's and others are out there, and you can just acquire those and function like that. But it's easier to just take those rules, because they're essentially the same thing. And of course, they're already designed the way they want them anyway, so they just take those rules. But that's the thing about rules. Now, if you're a legislator going to change the rules, it would look like a bill, because just like when you go file a bill, you go to the staff, blah, 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 and they draw it up. We do it the same way. It's just not going into the statutes like that. So there's some joint rules between the House and Senate, and those always have to be approved. And when there's any changes to that, well, both bodies have to agree to it, that kind of thing. Yeah, and what I started doing is I would just file to change the rules, and then I started, took a good while to even get it heard back in the Democrat days, and I finally, back to stories in time, I asked the chairman of the Rules Committee, Sid Hudson, when the Democrats were in the majority one time, "You're going to hear my bill," and they kind of laughed and made a joke about it, and I laughed along with them, guys that work together and people that work together. And he goes, "Oh, you really want to have that? You want us to hear the bill that's going to make us hear all bills, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm serious about it." So we hear it, and they vote it down, party lines, And that's the answer to all of this when they say, we don't have enough time to hear potentially all the bills. Well, yes, we do. If we're the committee and I'm the legislator bringing up a bill and it's paper napkins or some other dumb idea, then I get to offer it. This bill's about paper napkins, barbecue restaurants, blah, blah, blah. Be happy to take questions. That's the way it works, if you've watched them. And then some other member can immediately say, "Mr. Chairman, I move that we table this HB, whatever the number is, the bill." If everybody's of the same mind and they think it's a dumb idea like that one, and they're ready to go, they can just push in favor to table that bill. It's done. Next bill. It's that simple and easy. So it's not a burden. They like to act like, it's something more than what it is. Anybody else have any questions or comments? I've got copies of this. If you'd like to buy a copy, $15. Okay. And I've got them up here. And so after we finish, talk to you then. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate you coming in. Any last questions?
A few weeks ago, I went to that city council meeting and they talked about approving a peace pavilion. And I'm kind of feeling like they're going to use it to be like an anti-Second Amendment pavilion, because I don't know, it just seems like they use things like that to twist it, to make it, like a tragedy, and they'll use it like a Hegelian dialect. I don't know, that's just something local that I seen developing.
Okay.
It's $1 million piece pavilion too.
Keep an eye on that for us.
All right, thank you.
All right, the Republican convention, as I mentioned, for Kay County is next Saturday. There's still spots available, so if you want more information, I have some information about that. We talked about it earlier, so if you are interested, check with me after the meeting. Anything else? Well, thanks for being here today. We'll see you all in a month, next time around. All right.